If you're a politician and you're desperately trying to make people care about a particular issue, even though no one in their right mind would care about it, there's a familiar tactic you can rely on. You can try to convince everyone that unless you get your way, they're going to suffer somehow in their personal lives. You can construct a scenario in which there will be real, tangible consequences for people who disobey. For example, Barack Obama claimed that if you didn't support him, then climate change would probably destroy the planet. Joe Biden said that if you didn't vote for him, then COVID would wipe out your entire family. Of course, Kamala Harris made the case that if you didn't vote for her, then you might not be able to castrate yourself in prison at taxpayer expense in order to affirm your subjective sense of gender identity. All of these arguments, however persuasive you might find them, were intended to make you say, well, I don't want that horrible thing to happen to me, therefore I'm voting for this particular politician. But as common as this tactic may be, it does have its limits. And if you want an illustration of those limits, look no further than the current line of argument from leading Democrats, including Tim Walsh and Elizabeth Warren. At the moment, they're all trying to convince you to empathize with an illegal alien named Abrego Garcia, who was deported by the Trump administration last month to El Salvador. You've certainly heard about this case. And to that end, Tim Walsh and Elizabeth Warren want you to imagine a world in which you're walking in Abrego Garcia's shoes. In order to convince you to care about this man's plight, they're inviting you to pretend that somehow you share his problems and that someday soon, you might share in his fate as well. Watch.
And this whole thing with Mr. Abrego Garcia, it's that old wisdom and terrifying is if you're not speaking up for this man, there will be no one left to speak up for you.
We do not disappear people in the United States because here's the thing. If they can disappear Mr. Abrego Garcia, then they can disappear you. It's about disappearing people, but it's also about obeying court orders.
If they can disappear Mr. Abrego Garcia, then they can disappear you. That's the message. We can assume it was carefully tested by the same focus group that thought Michelle Obama's podcast was a good idea. They truly believed that everyone hearing this line would drop whatever they were doing and demand justice for poor Abrego Garcia. After all, who among us wants to be deported to El Salvador for literally no reason whatsoever? It's something that can happen to any of us right now. Any single one of us could just be thrown into a van and next thing you know, we're in an El Salvadoran prison. The problem is that, as you might have guessed, there are more than a couple of differences between the typical American citizen and a man like Mr. Abrego Garcia. And once you take a look at those differences, you'll very quickly realize that actually there is no chance that the Trump administration will be able to disappear you in a similar fashion. And there's no chance that the Trump administration would try to do that. So let's start with a police report that documents Mr. Abrego Garcia's activities in 2019 when he was loitering in a Home Depot parking lot in Hyattsville, Maryland. And we'll put the first page of the report up on the screen there. You can see it. As you can see, officers immediately recognized that a guy named Cristian Hernandez Romero, whose code name is Bimbo, was loitering alongside Abrego Garcia. And Bimbo, according to this report, is a well-known member of the MS-13 sailors clique. There were also 2 small plastic bottles containing marijuana on the scene for what it's worth. Additionally, a man named Jose Guillermo Dominguez was also hanging out with this crew, and he was sporting tattoos of skulls covering his eyes, which the police noted was indicative of Hispanic gang culture. And indeed, Dominguez was later determined to be a member of MS-13 as well. He apparently holds the rank of Chequeo, is that it? With the moniker Maniaco. Now, at this point, I know what you're thinking. You're saying to yourself, well, so what? This doesn't tell me anything about Mr. Abrego Garcia. Who among us hasn't been hanging out in a Home Depot parking lot with 2 members of MS-13 with Coke cans full of marijuana strewn all over the place? It's the most natural thing in the world. For all we know, Mr. Abrego Garcia could have been in the wrong place at the wrong time. Maybe he was just shopping in Home Depot. He was picking up some fertilizer or something, and he just so happened to. I mean, it could happen. If I had $1 for every MS-13 gang member that I've inadvertently hung out with, I would be a very wealthy man. So it's all very normal. Back in the day, animals used to be raised on small family pastures, but today we have these. They're called concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs for short. The average dairy CAFO has over 1,000 cows, and that means a ton of manure. And what do you think happens to all that animal crap? Well, does it magically disappear? No, it gets stored in giant vats and can leach into our groundwater. No big deal, right? Well, let me tell you about this little county right next to Green Bay, Wisconsin, where cattle outnumber people 5-1. When they tested the water there, 60% of wells were contaminated with fecal microbes, along with high levels of nitrates, which can lead to all sorts of problems like birth defects and cancer. With all the runoff from industrial chemicals and pharmaceuticals in our water supply, the last thing anyone needs is an extra helping of feces when you take a sip. And that's why you should use Cove Pure to purify your water. Most filters on the market won't remove all the dangerous microscopic contaminants being released into our water supply. But Cove Pure can. Their clear-wave reverse osmosis technology is built for even the smallest particles. It's certified to remove up to 99.9% of total contaminants in your water, including the ones related to animal crap. The best part is you don't have to go through the hassle of a complex full home setup to protect yourself. Cove Pure sits beautifully on my countertop. I just plug it in and that's it. No drilling, no plumbers needed. One tap and I can get pure water at whatever temperature I want, hot, cold, or warm, instantly. Clean drinking water is one of the most important investments that you can make for your family's health. That's why I've partnered with them to get you guys $200 off. So make sure you use my link below or go to covepure.com/Walsh to get it now. The DOJ also released the second page of the police report, and here it is. It turns out that when he was interviewed by police, Abrego Garcia was, quote, wearing a Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie with rolls of money covering the eyes and the ears and mouth of the presidents on the separate denominations. Officers know such clothing to be indicative of the Hispanic gang culture. Wearing the Chicago Bulls hat represents that they are a member in good standing with MS-13. Officers contacted a past proven and reliable source of information who advised Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia is an active member of MS-13 with the Westerns clique. The confidential source further advised that he is also the rank of Chicao with the moniker of Chele. Now, again, you might be tempted to dismiss all of this, especially if you've heard the version of this story that's like circulating on social media. In fact, you may have heard the version I've seen people say that, well, they thought he was a member of MS-13 just because he was wearing a Chicago Bulls hat. Now, it's a Chicago Bulls hat with the money, with the eyes crossed out, along with hanging out with other MS-13 members, along with an informant saying, yes, he's a member of MS-13. All of those things together is what led officers to the conclusion that, it's extremely likely that this guy's affiliated with gangs. But still, it's just one police officer writing a report. Maybe for reasons that are completely unclear and inexplicable, this officer decided to frame some random people in a Home Depot parking lot one day. Could happen to anyone, just like Tim Walz and Elizabeth Warren said. Then they have to explain away this piece of evidence, which was just reported by Fox. This is a written domestic violence allegation that was drafted by Abrego Garcia's wife in 2021. In this document, she says that, quote, I'm reading, at this point, I'm afraid to be close to him. I have multiple photos and videos of how violent he can be and all the bruises he has left me. She also says that he punched her repeatedly and grabbed her arm, and then in 2023, he hit me with his work boot. She adds that in August of 2020, quote, he hit me in the eye, leaving a purple eye. Okay, so this is starting to get pretty heavy, admittedly. Still not a smoking gun. After all, how reliable is firsthand testimony from women anyway? I mean, it's not like Democrats ever told us to believe all women or anything like that. If that's your mindset, then you're probably wondering what other evidence might implicate Mr. Abrego Garcia. You're probably still in search of something, anything that might distinguish him from a normal, law-abiding American citizen. And then you might come across this report from Just the News, quote, Kilmar Abrego Garcia was stopped in Tennessee for driving erratically and speeding by a state trooper in late November 2022 and was found to be driving an SUV full of people coming from Texas with an expired Maryland license. The circumstances of the stop led the trooper to believe that human trafficking was involved, according to a summary of the incident recorded in Homeland's immigration alert system on December 6, 2022, close quote. So we have a suspected human trafficker in addition to suspected domestic violence and suspected MS-13 gang ties. What's the big deal? None of this was ever proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. Therefore, you might conclude Mr. Abrego Garcia is the victim of a truly horrifying violation of his civil liberties. If it can happen to him, it can happen to any of us. Truly, he should be returned to the United States right away. Except that there's another major problem. Even if you believe all that, which would require a suspension of disbelief that rivals what most schizophrenics would be capable of, you still have to contend with one very important, immovable fact, which is that Mr. Abrego Garcia had no right to be in this country in the first place. He was an illegal alien, period. And therefore, the Trump administration had every right to deport him. And that's exactly what they have done. Democrats have no answer to this point. Instead, they're staging bizarre press conferences in El Salvador, along with photo ops with Mr. Abrego Garcia. Senator Chris Van Hollen, for example, was photographed standing by himself at a podium in a room that appeared to be empty. And, it's hard to believe that Chris Van Hollen has any kind of advance team or a press office at all. It's one of the most humiliating photos you'll ever see. But this one's a close second. Here's Chris Van Hollen drinking margaritas with Mr. Abrego Garcia, the known MS-13 gang member and domestic abuser, allegedly. It's enough to make you feel a very small amount of pity for this senator, whoever he is. He probably flew over to El Salvador before he realized that this guy was a wife-beating gang member with a history of human trafficking, reportedly. And then after all this news came out, he decided, well, I've come this far. Why not have some margaritas? The writer Peachy Keenan summarized the left's current predicament this way, quote, the Democrats' top 4 heroes in America are now, 1, a murderer named Luigi, gun, a murderer named Carmelo, butcher knife, an MS-13 illegal gang member, and 4, a Palestinian Hamas supporter. It's an accurate summary, which is why it's so devastating. I mean, whatever problems the Republican Party has, and there are definitely plenty of problems, at least they're not falling over themselves to defend the absolute scum of the earth. In the business world, that's known as a competitive edge. And after this debacle of a press conference in El Salvador, along with the debacle of a press conference we mentioned at the top of the show, it's never been more apparent to more people. And that is why Democrats who are trying to turn a violent MS-13 gang member into a civil rights icon are today canceled. If you'd like to see what else I have to say, you can access my full show by going to dailywire.com or by going to the Matt Walsh Show Twitter page. Hope to see you there. Godspeed.